Hello, and welcome to my Modlist showcase, where I give an overview and opinion on mod lists to help find the right one for you. This time, we are looking at the Aldrnari mod list by user Sovereign, released for Skyrim Special Edition. The version I've been playing on is 1.3.1, released on the 21st of November 2021. You can check on the Webberjack Discord linked below for any changes and updates. Firstly, what is Aldrnari? The description reads, Aldrnari is made to be challenging, rewarding, and eventually you'll become an overpowered dragonborn who goes against terrible and fierce enemies, and is also deeply inspired by games like Dark Souls and Hellblade's Senua's Sacrifice. The list overall has a strong focus on visuals and combat, with a heavy Nordic theme throughout. And as of writing this list is one of, if not the biggest list available for Skyrim. Aldrnari is available to download from the Webberjack Modlist installer. While I won't cover the specifics of the installation in this video, the installation was incredibly easy, with clear instructions provided. For help with the download, you can follow along with my Webberjack explanation guide video on my channel and linked below. With over a staggering 1800 mods, it's a given that it'll take a long time to download. You'll need around 350GB of space on your PC, so you'll need to be prepared for that. But despite the size, it was incredibly easy to download, with clear instructions provided. Once in game, setting up the specific mod configurations is very easy, with a helpful guide for the best settings. Now for what the mod list adds. For this showcase, I'll be showing clips taken throughout my current playthrough. I have spent plenty of time with this list, and so I have a good grasp on what it's like to play. Looking at this footage, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you how great this list looks. By default, this list uses natural and atmospheric Tamriel 3, which fits perfectly and is what I'm showing off here. However, a bunch of ENB presets from the photorealistic Tamriel 12 ENB are included, which you're free to swap to if you want to change up the look, such as this one here, which was a personal favourite of mine. While the base ENB looks great, it's always welcome to have many options for personal taste. So talking about the game's look as a whole, I think Aldrnari is one of the best examples of a list fully embracing a specific theme. As you can likely tell, the entire look and feel of the list is inspired by Nordic themes and designs. A good example of the theme in action is the bridge outside Riverwood. In the base game it's made of a flat cobblestone, but in Aldrnari the bridge is made from a dark wood that looks like it was carved from an alpine tree. Pretty much everything in the world either has a new high resolution texture, improved model, or both. The trees have been overhauled with mods such as Skyrim 3D Plants and Trees, Ashben's Ablaze, and Trees Addon, which all add an incredible look to forests that still fit perfectly into Skyrim's world. The weather mod is uniquely bundled as part of the natural and atmospheric Tamriel ENB, and so, as the name suggests, it provides incredibly natural looking weathers, which really bring out the cold northern feeling of the world. Handling most of the lighting is the Lux mod, which is a personal favourite of mine. I think the caves are able to perfectly sum it up, where the light feels realistic, and you'll often need a torch to explore, but it's also not so pitch black that you can't see what's coming for you. Overall, the list looks amazing, and seeing as Skyrim has always taken inspiration from Nordic cultures, the theme feels right at home. Now obviously looking at it, this list is for mid to high end PCs, so you'll need to have the specs that are capable. However, the performance was perhaps the biggest shock for me. With over 1800 mods, I was fully prepared for it to tank my FPS and slow my PC, but actually it held around 50 to 60 FPS in the vast majority of areas. Given how good this list looks, and how overloaded with mods it is, it's a really impressive feat that it runs as well as it does. And if you're unsure if you'll be able to run it, the list's readme has a few spec recommendations and tweaks you can make to squeeze out some extra FPS. The specs I ran the list on are here on screen, and while I know it's very high end, I play on 1440p ultra-wide, which is usually a big hit to performance in Skyrim. Given how many mods there are, it should come as no surprise that most gameplay mechanics in Skyrim have had tweaks or changes. However, for the most part, it feels like the gameplay has been added upon to be more in-depth and satisfying, rather than completely changing things up. The mod experience makes it so you primarily gain XP from completing quests and killing monsters, rather than leveling up using skills like sneaking or light armor. And the mod Ordinator is used as the main perk overhaul, adding hundreds of new perks to choose from. This makes builds wildly different from each other, and more interesting than the standard your weapon now deals 20% more damage and so on. The benefits of standing stones have also been tweaked with Andromeda, which makes their effects much more creative and impactful. Learning magic has been changed by the mod Challenging Spell Learning, where now you can't learn a spell unless you have enough magicka required to use it, which is simple yet really balances spell learning. And while this list doesn't focus on survival needs and such, you'll still find that the world is more deadly overall. One way this is countered is by how much you can craft and prepare for your adventures. For example, the mod Scroll Scribe allows you to craft powerful scrolls for those not so proficient in magic. Mystic Condenser lets you combine low-level potions into better ones, and the Alchemist's Arsenal gives the ability to craft powerful arrows, traps and bombs. It's also worth noting that this list isn't intended for sneak builds. Now of course you can still be sneaky if you want, but no mods implementing sneak tools have been added, and it's much easier to be detected. Overall, the gameplay is a lot more in-depth than vanilla, and the world is more difficult to survive in, but to balance the difficulty, you can now take the time to craft and specialise your character so that you're prepared for anything in your way. At the start, I mentioned how the mod author took inspiration from Dark Souls. I think a good way to relate it is how Dark Souls is obviously very difficult, yet if you take the time to learn the mechanics and manage your stamina well, you can be just as, if not more, dangerous than the enemies. The main combat mod used is Enguard, which could get a video on its own, but to name a few notable tweaks: stamina now drains quicker, and you can't attack when you have no stamina, but to balance this, stamina regen is faster if you quickly back away from the fight. Also, enemies use stamina as well, so the same mechanic applies to them. A new dodge mechanic has been added, which can really save your skin if you use it efficiently. Your hits now have a higher chance to stagger enemies depending on their armour, and melee weapons have been tweaked so two-handed, sword and shield, and dual wielding all feel different from each other. There's a bunch more changes I could talk about, so if you're interested in seeing the new mechanics and playstyles, I recommend checking out the Todori YouTube channel. As for other mods that affect combat, Palladium racials give NPCs the same racial bonuses as you. A custom leveling overhaul based off mods such as Skyrim Revamped, Real Bosses, Heritage, and Ubervamps has been implemented, which makes it so enemies will always pose a challenge. And finally, third-person combat has been overhauled, with mods like True Directional Movement, which makes third-person feel much better and modernised, and ZUPA, which has a third-person drinking animation, like drinking an Estus flask in Dark Souls. I could go on and on with the tweaks to combat, but to sum it up, combat is now incredibly dangerous for the unprepared. However, if you're prepared to learn when it's best to move and attack, and also learn your enemy's moves and gear up appropriately, you can become a fighter worthy of the Dragonborn name. Heaps of new content have been added into the world, making Skyrim feel fresh again, and adding hundreds of hours of new stuff to do. Many huge DLC-sized quests have been added, such as the Forgotten City, Worm's Tooth, Beyond Reach, Darkened, and many more, all of which are high quality with good writing and voice acting. Also, many of the main quests have been altered to add more roleplay options, including Alternate Perspective, which adds Helgen as a town you can visit, and see attacked by the opening dragon from a different perspective. Perhaps the biggest difference you'll notice when you start the game is how much more fleshed out the world looks. Most towns and cities have been expanded to feel like actual places families could live. New buildings, barricades, docks, and more make Skyrim's location feel much more believable and interesting, and more akin to what Bethesda would have made if Skyrim was released today. I mean the original Skyrim, not the one that comes out like every year. Sound and music are a big part of this list, with the Nordic songs being a part of the list author's inspiration. So many audio mods have been added that affect every sound in the game. Key mods like Sounds of Skyrim add hundreds of new sounds into the world, that change depending on weather, time, and location. And as for music mods, loads of new tracks have been added, which are all inspired by traditional Nordic and Celtic music, with a big focus on the Yggdrasil music bundle. If you're interested in listening to the added tracks, you can see their names on screen. As I personally enjoy just the vanilla soundtrack, some of the new music was jarring at first. However, I quickly got into it, and it definitely fits the list's theme. Have a listen to the audio yourself. hundreds of new items have been distributed into the world. Mods like Skyrim Weapon Expansion, Mordhau Weapon Pack, and Animated Armory add tons of high quality weapons into the world, all feeling unique to use and lore friendly. The same goes for armors, which all look great and offer so much choice for your character. As you can see here, this is the list of mods which either add or change the look of armors, outfits and shields. And so yeah, there's quite a few. As for new spells, some of the key mods are Arcanum and Triumvirate, which together add over 300 new spells to learn, as well as adding new mage archetypes like druids, warlocks and shamans. And the mod Forgotten Magic Redone adds incredibly powerful spells, which can only be accessed through hidden spell tomes in the world, and you can find hints to their location if you have a keen eye. For some other notable changes with the list, mods such as Skyrim Immersive Creatures and Mihail Monsters and Animals add tons of new and improved creatures and enemies into the world, with huge amounts of detail. Dragonborn Shouts perk tree adds an entire perk tree dedicated to shouting. Over 20 new player homes have been scattered about Skyrim. Loads of new NPCs and followers populate the world, such as Audi, Hoff, Livia, and Lucian, who people seem to think sounds like me. Hundreds of NPC faces have been added, using a wide variety of mods, which from the ones I've seen, all seem to fit well. And I can't forget, there's new corgi followers, and cats you can buy from cat shops around the world, which made me way too happy when I first discovered it. Now for some additions and changes to the list, but first I must stress, any changes you make to the list has nothing to do with the mod list author. You should only do so if you have an understanding of modding, and accept that any consequences are yours to deal with. If you like survival mods like me, I would look into using Sunhelm, which adds all the hunger and weather requirements you could want. I didn't use it myself, so I can't say for sure if it works, but there's a bunch of patches available to make it work with the list, so it seems like a safe bet. If you're using ultrawide like me, you'll need to add the Nordic UI ultrawide patch. And as a final note, the mod Alternate Conversation Camera can be disabled if you don't like the zooming in camera, and you can remove enemy health bars by changing the true directional movement settings. Other than that, we're talking about a list of over 1800 mods, so you know, there's not much more you can add. Even though I've covered many key parts of this list, there's still plenty I haven't talked about, and with my relatively short time of the list, I feel like I barely scratched the surface. And so if you're wanting to do a playthrough of Skyrim without feeling the need to install new mods as you go, then Aldrnari definitely has you covered. Going in, I was honestly a bit skeptical, as with 1800 mods I was worried the list would feel like a blend of stuff with no focus, yet this is actually one of the most focused lists I've ever played. Aldrnari fully commits to the Viking Dark Souls feel, yet still doesn't take away from the core of Skyrim that makes it so addictive and lovable. The combat may be jarring for some, as it definitely has the biggest change gameplay wise. It's a lot more difficult and complex, and you'll need to get used to gearing up your character for specific situations, but once you get the hang of it, it's incredibly satisfying, and definitely achieves the feeling it's going for. If this is your first time with Skyrim, or a modded version of Skyrim, then this list will be too overwhelming for you. However, if you're wanting a challenging and overhauled combat, or wanting a playthrough of Skyrim that's filled with hundreds and hundreds of new things to discover, and a list you can dedicate a lot of time to, then this list is definitely the one for you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like, as that helps the channel grow. I also have a Twitch where I'll sometimes play chill games and try to stream mod lists without the stream breaking, and a Discord if you want to talk about mod stuff or anything else. Other than that, big thanks to my Patreon supporters, LegitRob95, Jason Casey, Jack Ma, Michael Eric, Nicholas J, and Christian Hell. You really helped me through this, and, you know, YouTube doesn't give you much money, so it really helps, and I'm so thankful. Thank you and farewell.